And it's a really important discussion to figure out how the very important research that you all started then is now continuing in other ways, but also how we can be much more systematic about documenting working class struggles and understanding them in terms of the crisis of the state, crisis of capital, and the crisis of the working class internationally, and then specifically the methodology that is being developed, which I think draws a lot from the feminist movement, but that's another whole other long story of doing not history from below, not ethnography from below, but from within, and going out, and we can talk about metaphors after.
Some more questions?
We just go to the documents.
I'm Billy. I just wanted to share with Midnight Notes, and I most definitely include Sylvia, she's sitting off to the side, about what your work has done for me personally. George, you mentioned that you saw work and you saw these manifestations in things like doorknobs and bricks. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time I read The New Enclosures and reading Capital Politically, the first time I came across Harry Kleber. It was like my physical vision changed. You know, I have my mental abstract, vision, and then I have my eyes. And that same thing happened to me. And it happened to me after reading two pieces. And it was very profound for me. And, we talk about all these politics and these writings in a very macro level. I mean, I know personal relations have come out in the panel. But to be honest, the bulk of the use of your work for me has been in very micro interpersonal relationships. I come from a very conservative, right-wing, Republican Catholic family. We're Irish Catholic, and it was very rigid. And there was a lot of conflict, and there was just pure hate between myself and my parents and my family members for a long time, because there was just a huge disconnect. And I remember after I read some of your work, and in particular Sylvia's book, Caliban and the Witch, I began to see my parents and my family in a different way. They were both oppressors towards me for being queer, but they were also victims of oppression. My mother in particular, I mean, you mentioned the idea of sedimented knowledges or sedimented ideas, but I also think there's sedimented violence. And until I read Caliban and the Witch, I did not quite understand how my mother was constructed, how much of her identity was beyond her control, and how a lot of that sedimented violence that has been throughout history has manifested in the relationship between her and I. And also in terms of The New Enclosures, I was constantly fighting to create a commons within my own household, to try to find a space for me so I can begin to build an identity that wasn't dictated for me, or wasn't based on my parents making an investment in a child that's going to take care of them after they're unable to take care of themselves. And it helped me get through very difficult times. And you think of Marxism and anarchism and autonomous politics as something that is almost, you can really get lost in the apersonality of it. It doesn't seem to be rooted in, it's very abstract, so you kind of lose yourself in that headiness of it. So I'm lucky that I came across your work, and I'm lucky that I was able to root it within that context. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
I want to have a small comment on the discussion before. Obviously, I won't stay long. Obviously, I was on there 79, and I won't comment on that. But I feel, Sylvia, I have to defend a little bit the notion of autonomous Marxism, the way it represented to me when I left my own phase of history, when I read from Harry his own definition of autonomous Marxism. To me represented his own conceptions, a very broad, as you mentioned, way to include a broad varieties of different perspectives, definitely, which included wage for housework and included the Negrian aspect and the Negrian take on it, on labor. And it was very important to draw a line vis-à-vis the dominant conception of orthodox Marxism that obviously was not based on a self-making of the class, or the conception of autonomy that Harry at the time saw it as having different dimensions vis-à-vis working class, vis-à-vis capital, vis-à-vis each section of the class, and therefore emphasizing the wage hierarchy, something that now Neill doesn't do much, but in the broad conception is over there, and vis-à-vis the organization of the class. So what I felt to say, I think that broad notion, was useful to me, has been useful to others, to kind of find a way to say, hey, we are different than orthodox Marxists. There is some value in that difference, and of course then opens up terrain for debates within that. Just wanted to say that.
Okay, right, we've gone on a bit further than we should have done, so we're going to have to wind it up here. I just want to say a couple of things really quickly. I do think it's important for organisations. They sometimes find it difficult to deal with histories of splits and all that. Obviously, we've all probably been through this at some stage or other. But it is important to understand the history of those splits and also the political differences and able to separate them from relationship differences as well. So I do think it's an important thing, and I think it's good that people have actually brought up these issues now. And it's a good time to resolve them in a sense as well.
Yeah.